Calling the Bible a fairy tale is one of the classic tactics of denouncers trying to disprove our beliefs and our convictions. However, not only are they throwing these at the hardest wall possible, that being the front line of Christian fundamentalism, which are notoriously intractable, science-dismissing and hot-headed, but they're also using the flimsiest of ammunition that, when given even a serious study, falls apart before they can make any great impact. There is so often that much of this is pointless to discuss. But why should I break the habit of doing my homework? And this is my channel, so stuff them. In this video, we're going to examine a selection of helpfully supplied scriptural references that apparently prove the Bible is a fairy tale. This involves mentioning various so-called fairy tale creatures that appear in the Bible and references that link them. Now, to stop people from claiming the Texas sharpshooter fallacy against me, which is difficult to say even before you have gin, my predictions are a combination of metaphor misinterpretation, ignorance of language, lack of relevant experience that helps explain things, and a general lack of discernment in their research, if they did any at all. So, that is my predictions. That's the bullseye drawn. Where's the pen? I know I had it earlier. Here we are. Here's the pen. Locked away. It's in the drawer. The bullseye's drawn. It's time to start shooting. Starting off with zombies is a pretty bad place to start, since the term zombie didn't appear in literature until the 19th century, and has never appeared in any Bible. Furthermore, it was borrowed from an amalgamation of cultural terms brought together in Haiti under the Catholic slavers to form the religion that we know as voodoo. However, enough folklore of walking corpses exist across the world, from the Tibetan Rolangs to the Norse Droga and the French Revenant, we can forgive a lack of non-fanfiction fairy tales regarding the zombie, and we'll take it as more of a catch-all for the various Walking Dead across the world. Isaiah does indeed mention bodies of the dead rising and singing. However, this section is known as a song of trust in God's provision, heavily implying both the prophetic angle and poetic license. In short, this section is rich in metaphor, and being literal about it is impossible, and quite frankly, ridiculous. Other sections are better for this, like the dead walking the streets in Matthew 27, verse 51 to 54, where one would expect historical records to make themselves known, especially if the dead were found walking the streets. But then again, it's more likely that the earthquake following Jesus' death broke open tombs and caused the deceased to fall out into the streets, as is evidenced by many cemeteries and archaeological finds being raised by the same tectonic forces. So this is a very poor choice of verses, and quite frankly, a terrible way to start. Again, sourcing from Isaiah, and by the title alone is a section of prophecy, and thus we can allow a metaphor to exist. Even if we can't help but think of Mr. Tumnus or Grover being existing in this, the Hebrew term soyer is more often used to refer to goats, and only seems to be commonly used for satyrs in prophetic sections, or where other translations mention demon goats, which seems to have a particular suffix to indicate the difference. So, sorry guys, satyrs, not really a thing to consider. Quite apart from using the wrong verse for this, they suggest verse 26, and 27 being the appropriate reference, consulting with familial spirits is frowned upon since it's linked with sorcery, blood magic and divination. Many can be considered charlatans, like spiritualists today, preying on the vulnerable and the lost. This shows that even back then, followers of Yahweh were told to be discerning when it comes to the spiritual side of things. It may seem magical, most of the stuff they believe in, but they know it's worthwhile remembering. Not everyone is looking out for their best interests. I did some studies into the magics expressly forbidden in the Bible, and they all link to spirits in some way. Sorcery, the Hebrew term kashath, to mean witch, literally meaning the practice of sorcery, is automatically associated with darker, more satanic spells, or sadistic spells rather. Also known as blood magic, it can lead not only to letting too much blood, but also allow for blood-borne diseases to spread, or even simply infecting the wounds. Add that to the prohibition of spilling blood of any kind, and anyone doing so for magical purposes is not a good person to have around. Whilst our modern understanding of a cockatrice is a mixture of dragon and bird, the term used in Isaiah is more commonly associated with snakes, venomous ones being in particular, like the adder or viper. Add that to the passage mentioned in Isaiah being a prophecy where all living things, friends and enemies alike, live alongside each other. We can see how an innocent child being able to place one's hand in the nest as something extremely lethal, without any care, shows a true paradise. Therefore, this is certainly a metaphor. Another being not known for its appearance in Grimm's fairy tales, but since it's the Bible, it's not unexpected for creatures fighting against angels to be demons. Technically speaking, they are both from the same stock, the only difference being the demons disobeyed God, rebelled, and thus falling and become demons. Why not argue that angels are fairy tale creatures to cover your bases? You may as well whilst you're there, and yet that's missing from the list. This is a classic one, and can be looked at in three ways. First, in terms of symbolism. In the Bible, the unicorn is constantly referred to as a symbol of strength and power, which goes against the modern understanding of purity and innocence. A certain creature that allows only a virgin to touch it, because they are also so pure and innocent. Second, in terms of language. The Hebrew riem literally translates to wild oxen, and is done so in the majority of other translations. Third, in terms of the understanding of the times. If we use, for example, the King James Version, we have to remember the most likely reference to a unicorn will be found somewhere in a bestiary. Many of these mention alternate names, such as monoceron, ecloceron, and rhinoceros, some even mentioning a relative with two horns called the bicornis. Some even theorise it was referring to the elasmotherium, or Siberian unicorn. In short, compared with the animal known as the camel leopard, which, interestingly enough, is actually a real creature that we would see in safari parks and zoos, and even out in Africa, an odd-toed ungulate with a horn isn't too far-fetched, no matter how you slice it. I've only been able to find one fairy tale about a talking donkey, if by that you mean talking to humans, and that was before Shrek was ever made. Having done a Reels run, an addendum, and a related video on how animals can communicate without the need for words, I'm not going to bash on about this. All I'll say is, if you think an animal needs to literally speak your language to make its feelings known, you shouldn't be allowed anywhere near animals, because Lord knows what you'll do to them. Revelation is a huge prophecy, and so likely to be full of metaphor. This dragon in particular, having 7 heads with 7 crowns, might be a bit of a hint here. Interestingly enough, I did a project on, a couple of years back, that looked into dragons potentially being angels, with the descriptions of the devil, the seraphim and the cherubim being comparable to dragons in many ways. With this in mind, there's no reason to dismiss dragons, which have appeared in one form or another in human cultures across the world. And there's every reason to add them to the heavenly host. So, looking back at this, I think my predictions were more or less correct. So many of them have just been metaphor, particularly those from Isaiah and Revelation, ignorance of the language used, no experience of explaining some of the simple things like the talking animals, and such a lack of discernment in research that makes me think the person who made this meme just typed "this thing, Bible," into Google and copied the first thing they could find. Also considering a clear preference for the King James Bible, which is known for its florid and embellished language, one can't help but ask, who thought this was worthwhile sharing? No effort was made into making this remotely sensible. This is infuriatingly amateurish, and wouldn't have made it into any serious school of thought. I honestly don't think Christopher Hitchens or even Richard Dawkins would take this seriously. Stalwart atheists and outspoken members of society as they are still academics and should have higher standards of research, even into topics they themselves have little patience for. Maybe Ricky Gervais might take it seriously, but we all know what happens when we take comedians too seriously. This is quite frankly embarrassing, and the only reason it's getting traction is because so few people bother to fact check, which unfortunately is common in the forums that it and similar things get shared in. And that happens on both sides. I can't deny it, but any atheist that says their posts are more sensible than the young earth creationists who deny evolution is seriously deluding themselves. Especially if they post stuff like this. This, my friends, serves as another reminder, as if one was needed, that you need to do your research before you post something, lest you come off as a massive idiot. Understanding the material is more important than trying to disprove it, no matter the cost. So don't fall into the trap of posting something before you check it against established information. This happens too often on both sides, and until that stops, people will just keep making stupid, thoughtless arguments. The irony is, the best advice I can give here is from a fairy woman, courtesy of Terry Pratchett's Discworld. Try using your head for something other than nutting folk. So do your research. Stay humble. Stay safe. And God be with you, my friends.